Have you ever wondered how modern web pages are made? How the web browser knows what to display and where to display it? How interactive web pages work internally, and how such web pages are designed? In this video tutorial, we'll go through all the basics of how to make your own web page, as well as some pretty advanced stuff. By the end of this video, you'll hopefully know how to make a cool interactive web page. When you open web pages like Google, Wikipedia, and the one you're on right now, YouTube, a document is sent to your computer via the internet and read by the browser. This document is often referred to as the page source. You can view this document by right-clicking and selecting View Page Source in Chrome or Firefox. If you're using Internet Explorer, you can right-click and select View Source. The code you see is a language that your web browser can understand. This language is called HTML, which stands for HyperText Markup Language. The HTML code tells your browser how the web page is supposed to look based on a set of rules. Although these rules are well defined, different browsers interpret the rules differently. In the next section, we'll look at the different browsers.
When you're just starting with HTML, the notepad that comes with Windows will serve you just fine. You can do all the same editing as you can do in other notepad variants. However, when you start to get into bigger websites and more complex layouts, you'll need an editor that keeps track of your tags for you. Notepad++ is a great free alternative to the regular notepad. You get all the same editing capabilities as in Notepad, but you also get syntax highlighting, autocomplete, and a few other neat features. You can, for example, collapse tags and edit multiple files side by side in the same window. Dreamweaver is another option. It has pretty much all the features of Notepad++, but you also get some templates for HTML. In addition, you get a what you see is what you get editor, and you can also preview how your code will look in the browser. That pretty much sums it up as far as editors are concerned. The browser also makes a difference, however, as some elements are displayed differently. A good example is Internet Explorer 8. You can butcher even the most basic layouts. There is a way to prevent this to some extent, but I still recommend downloading something else if you're using Internet Explorer. Firefox, Google Chrome, and Opera are all good options.
Once you have chosen which editor and web browser to use, we are ready to get started. Web pages are basically HTML documents with coding. To create this HTML document, we just open a new text document and save it as .html. With Notepad++, you can save it directly as an HTML document. To see what the web page or HTML file looks like, we just have to open it in our web browser of choice. Right now we'll just see the hello we coded when we saved the file. We can change this by typing something else. Open the HTML file in your editor and type in, for example, "it works." Now save the file, Ctrl S. Refresh your web browser and see that it says it works.
So now you've created the HTML document and tried opening it. You're not quite ready to begin making a website yet though. HTML documents need to have a basic layout to be interpreted properly by the browser. What we start with is the HTML tag. It tells the browser we're using HTML code. The HTML tag must contain two other tags. The first tag is called head and the other one's called body. Head should come first. It should contain information about the page. For instance, the title of the tab, the style sheet it uses, stuff like that. The body tag is for the content of the page. Most of the code goes in here. That's the basic structure all HTML files should have. In addition, you might want to include what version of HTML you're using. In this tutorial, we're going to use XHTML, so you should put the following at the top of the HTML document. Now, I'm not going to bother explaining this to you, so you'll find it in the description of the video. You should also make your HTML tag look like this. That's also in the description. What this does is essentially tell the browser that we're using the XHTML version of HTML.
Now we'll try out some simple text formatting and get into a few basic tags. A tag is just a piece of coding which tells the web browser how to display the text or content of the HTML file. First, let us write two sentences and place them under each other. This is a sentence. This is another sentence. Save the file and open it in a web browser. The sentences will end up on the same line. This is because the browser doesn't know how to display the text yet. The tag or piece of coding which tells the browser to display the second sentence on the next line is BR. Place the tag next to the first sentence, save, and reopen or update the HTML file. Now let's say we want the first sentence to be in bold writing. This can be done with the tag B, but the B tag will affect all the text unless we use another tag to end it. The stop tag is just B with a slash. This goes for all tags except for the tags which don't need to be stopped, one of them being the one we have already used, BR. This is because the BR just tells the browser to display the rest of the text starting from the next line. So we will place the first sentence in between the B tag and the B stop tag, and it should now be in bold writing. We should also make a heading for our web page. The tag for heading is H. H1 will make a big heading, H2 a medium-sized heading, and H3 an even smaller heading. For now, we'll just call our page My First Web Page. Now we have a heading and two sentences. And the next thing I'm going to show you is how to start a new paragraph. This is done with the P tag. Just as with the B tag, we have to end the P tag. We type in "this is a new paragraph" and place the sentence in between a P and a P stop tag. Now save and update the HTML file. So far everything we have written has been placed on the left side of the web page. It looks better when the text is in the center of the screen. This is obviously done with a center and a center stop tag.
With the knowledge of basic tags, it's time to move on to what's called attributes. Attributes are small amounts of information that tells how a tag is supposed to be interpreted. Take the tag P as an example. P, which stands for paragraph, tells the browser that a paragraph of text is about to be read. But the P tag does not say anything about how the text is supposed to look. You can add attributes to specify this. Align is an attribute that defines how the text should be aligned. If you want to align the text to the right instead of the default left, you can write align equals right in the P tag. Then your code should look something like this. There are some attributes that apply to all tags. Examples of these are class and ID, which we will learn more about later. Some attributes, though, are tag specific, meaning that they only apply to a few tags. The align attribute, which we will learn about earlier, is an example of this. Another tag-specific attribute is the BG color attribute for body and some other tags. This attribute sets the background color of the element. To set the background color of the body, which is essentially the whole page, to gray, we simply write BG color equals gray in the body tag. Your code should now look something like this.
Now that you have most of the basics in place, it's time to move on to some more advanced tags. First off, we're going to make a link. To make a link, you need to use a tag with an attribute. The tag is called A, which stands for anchor. Put this somewhere on its own in the body. The A tag needs an attribute to know what it's linking to. The attribute is called href, which stands for HyperText reference. href needs to be set to the target of the link. Your A tag should now look something like this. We're not done yet though. After the A tag, you need to put in a name or description for the link. This is the text that shows up in blue underline on your website. After the text, we need to close the A tag. This lets the browser know we've finished our link, so any code that comes after it doesn't become a part of it. Hopefully you now have a line of code that looks similar to this. Now that you have a link, let's add an image to your website. The idea here is the same as with the link. The only real difference is the name of the tag and the attribute. The tag is called img, which is short for image. You'll also be using the src attribute instead of the href attribute. Again, place the tag on its own somewhere inside the body tag. Place the src attribute in the tag after img, but this time pointing to an image file rather than a website. With the img tag, unlike the a tag, you don't need a name or a description. Because of that, we can close the tag right away. Finally, let's add a table to your website. Tables consist of multiple tags to define rows and cells. First, we have to make the table itself. This is done using the table tag. We need to have both an opening and a closing table tag, because all the tags that make up the table's content need to go in there. Now that we have the base table, it's time to add some actual data to it. First, we need to make a row. This is done with a tr tag. Like the table tag, we need both an opening and a closing tag, because the data for the cells need to go inside it. Now let's add some actual data. We can do this in two ways, but since we're in the first row, let's add a header cell. This is done using the th tag. What the th tag does is make the text in the cell look bolded, which can be nice if you want to present data in a table and you need to show what type of data it is. For every th tag you add, another column is added to the table. Now that you have some table headers in place, let's make a new row with some data in it. The procedure is the same as I just explained, but now we have to use the td tag instead of the th tag. TD stands for table data, and the text is normal here. Your code should look similar to this. Now that you've created a table, let's add a border to it. We do this by taking the border attribute and placing it in the table tag. We can use a border equals 1. This gives an inset border type.
Remember when we learned about attributes? Well, there is a way to get even more control of how your site should be laid out. The attribute style is one of those attributes that apply to all tags. In this attribute, you can write several statements regarding how the element should look. Let's do an example. We're going to put a border around the image we just added. First, let's put the image on a new line using the br tag. To add a border, you could just use the border attribute. Another more customizable method would be to use the style attribute. To add the border with the style attribute, we just append style equals border inset 5 pixels. It's important to remember the colon and the semicolon. What this does is add a border that is 5 pixels wide and that uses the inset style. The cool thing with style attributes is that we can apply as many styles as we want. If you want to make our image resized to 100 by 100 pixels, we can add width 100 pixels and height 100 pixels. The reasons for the colons and the semicolons becomes clear here. It's used to separate different styles. The language, the style attribute, is not HTML. It's an entire other language altogether. This language is called CSS, or Cascading Style Sheets. We will look more into CSS later. A list of CSS attributes can be found by following this link, which is also in the description of the video. As we learned earlier with the style attributes, there is a language for styling web pages. This is called CSS, or Cascading Style Sheets. There are 3 ways of writing CSS. You could either write it in a style attribute of each element. This is what we did earlier. Another way is to use the HTML tag style. This is a tag supplied by HTML to define styles, which can be used to style several elements at once. A third, more common way is to store the style in a separate document, and then refer to the document with the link tag. This enables several web pages to use the same styles. The link tag takes some attributes to determine where the file is and what it's called. Further in this tutorial, we're going to focus on using a separate document. For this, you need to make the separate file called styles.css in the same directory as the HTML file. Then, in the HTML file, we can link to the CSS file by writing this line in the head text. Link rel equals stylesheet, type equals text / CSS, href equals styles.css. At last, we're ready to begin coding CSS.
Now that you know what CSS is, it's time to learn the basic syntax. Styles are made up of different attributes. To make styles look different, you have to assign the attributes a value. For example, we can take the attribute color. If we want to make a style of red text, we would set color to red. This is done simply by taking the attribute color, putting a colon and a space behind it, and then putting the value name, which is red in this case. After the value, you need a semicolon, or the browser is going to get confused and think the next attribute is actually a part of that value.
Now that you know how to use CSS, we have to try it out. To start off, we should really have a background color for our web page. To apply styles to tags in the CSS document, we first write the name of the tag, body, to affect the whole page, and then the styles in between two curly brackets. The style for background color is, of course, background color. And to choose the color, we can either use color codes or just black, blue, red, white, and so on. If we're using multiple styles per tag, and we often will, it's important to remember the semicolon.
When styling a tag, you have the choice between styling the tag itself, like we've done so far, or using a class and ID. To apply a style to a paragraph using class, we will write this in the CSS file. p.red, and then the attributes that should be set. This makes a class for the p tag with the attribute specified. In the HTML code, we will write a p tag with the attribute class set to red, which is the same as our class in the CSS file.
To use ID, we write essentially the same thing, but we need to use the hash symbol instead of the period between the tag and the name of the ID. In the HTML file, we simply make a p tag with the ID attribute set to test. You can either use class or ID. Both will work, and it's really just a matter of how you create and apply the style. However, it's a good practice to use ID for styles that are only used once. For example, let's say you want to style the page title. Assuming your page has only one title, you should use ID. ID is intended for unique styles that are only used once. Now let's say you want to style multiple paragraphs. This is when class should be used. As a rule, multiple tags with the same style are in the same class of that tag.
The span and div tags are very useful when you get into the more advanced website layouts. They can be used as containers for different parts of the page and give the page more structure. For example, the whole page could be contained in a single div, which contains a div for content, an index, and a title. The difference between span and div is that span has no formatting by default. This means you can use it inline without having to mess around with the styles too much. Let's try to use a div around paragraphs. The HTML code will look like this. We can then apply styles to these divs. Let's make the first two paragraphs green and the other two blue. Then we need to make two IDs in CSS. Now let's just use these IDs in our HTML code. Span can be used in the same way as divs. Let's make part of a sentence gray with span. The CSS code for this would be the following.
Float and position are two CSS attributes used to position elements on the page. The float style positions an element to either the left or the right, and the other boxes, images, and text will float around it. We can, for instance, float our image to the right. To do this, we give our image the class float_right. And in the HTML file, we must append id float_right to the img tag. The position style can be used in two main ways. We can set the value to relative or absolute. Absolute positions an element on the page using coordinates according to the whole page, while relative positions the element according to its original position. To actually choose the position, we use coordinates in pixel form. We choose how many pixels from the top, left, right, or bottom the element should be positioned. If we use absolute, the element will be placed x pixels from the top, left, right, or bottom. If we use relative, the element will be placed x pixel from where it would be without any positioning. Let's do an example. Say we want to move our table 50 pixels to the right of where it would be normally. We then give our table the ID pos_rel. Then, in the HTML file, we append the ID to the table by adding ID equals pos_rel.
Even though we've come far and are currently at the last chapter, there's still yet more to learn. In this chapter, we'll go through the box model. Most of the best looking web pages out there make use of something called the box model. The box model means that all elements in HTML can be considered as boxes, with a margin, a border, padding, and content. The margin is spacing around the box which is not colored or does not have any formatting. The border is quite literally a border around the box. Padding is a space inside the box which offsets the content. And lastly, the content is where the content of the box is. We can use div and span tags with this to make web pages with elements such as navigation bars and headers. Let's make a new page with a header, navigation bar, and content page. First, we'll make a div which surrounds the whole page. We'll set the width of this div to 1000 pixels and center it with margin auto. Then we make our header. This should be 100 pixels tall. To be able to see the divs, I'll make them stand out with colors. After this, we make our navigation bar. It will be float left and 200 pixels wide. We also set the height to be a minimum of 200 pixels. Lastly, we make the content page. It'll be 800 pixels wide with a minimum height of 200 pixels. To prevent it from overlapping the left nav, we need to make it float right.